He is paralyzed. Bronson Reed and Brock Lesnar beat down Seth Rollins in a massive attack on WWE RAW. This is disgusting. This is vile. This is the kind of assault that should result in arrests, criminal charges, and lifetime bans from professional wrestling. What Bronson Reed and Brock Lesnar did to Seth Rollins on Monday Night Raw wasn't wrestling, it was attempted murder. And if you're not absolutely sick to your stomach after witnessing that brutal, unnecessary, career-ending attack, then you need to re-watch it and understand the gravity of what just happened to one of WWE's biggest stars. Seth Rollins is paralyzed. Let that sink in for a moment. The man who rebuilt his knee twice. The man who carried WWE through its darkest days. The man who gave us classic after classic, bleeding and sweating for our entertainment. That man is now lying in a hospital bed, unable to move his legs, unable to feel anything below his waist, all because Bronson Reed and Brock Lesnar decided to play God with another human being's life and career. Comment right now if you think these two monsters should be fired immediately, because what I'm about to expose will make you question everything about WWE's safety protocols. Monday Night Raw was supposed to be a celebration. Seth was supposed to address his upcoming match, cut a promo, connect with the WWE Universe like he's done 1,000 times before. Instead, we witnessed something that will haunt professional wrestling for years. We watched in horror as two of the most dangerous men in WWE history combined their power to destroy Seth Rollins in a way that's never been seen before. The attack started innocuously enough, or so we thought. Seth was in the ring, microphone in hand, speaking from the heart about his journey, his struggles, his redemption. The crowd was hanging on every word. And then the lights went out. When they came back on, Bronson Reed was standing at the top of the ramp like a mountain of malice, and Brock Lesnar was emerging from the crowd like a predator who'd been stalking his prey for weeks. Seth had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, no backup coming to save him. He was alone in that ring, surrounded by over 600 pounds of pure violence and aggression. And what happened next was the most sickening display of brutality I've ever witnessed in my decades of covering professional wrestling. Bronson Reed hit the ring first, and the impact of his tsunami splash from the top rope literally shook the entire arena. The sound of Seth's ribs cracking echoed through the speakers. You could hear bones breaking. You could see Seth's body convulse from the impact. Medical experts have since confirmed that single move caused 3 fractured ribs, a collapsed lung, and severe internal bruising. But that was just the beginning. Before Seth could even process what was happening, before his body could register the catastrophic damage, Brock Lesnar was on him. And Brock wasn't there to wrestle. Brock wasn't there to compete. Brock was there to destroy. The German suplexes came rapid fire, each one more vicious than the last. Seth's neck snapped back with each throw. His spine compressed with each landing. And Brock had that look in his eyes, the dead, emotionless stare that tells you he's completely detached from the humanity of what he's doing. Drop a comment right now and tell me, should Brock Lesnar be banned from WWE for life after this attack? Because I genuinely don't see how you bring someone back after they've potentially ended another wrestler's career. But here's where it goes from brutal to absolutely criminal. After the 6th German suplex, Seth wasn't moving anymore. His body was limp. His eyes were glazed over. Medical personnel were trying to rush the ring. And what did Bronson Reed do? He climbed to the top rope again. He positioned himself directly above Seth's motionless body. And he delivered another tsunami splash, this time directly onto Seth's neck and spine. The sound still haunts me. It was like a car crash. Like thunder striking directly overhead. The ring literally broke underneath them. The canvas ripped. The support beams cracked. And Seth Rollins lay there, completely motionless, arms splayed out at unnatural angles, not moving a single muscle. The arena fell silent. 20,000 people went from cheering to gasping in collective horror. You could hear people crying in the crowd. You could see fans covering their children's eyes. The announcers stopped talking because what were they supposed to say? How do you call that? How do you provide commentary when you've just witnessed what might be a life-altering injury happening in real time? Here's what makes this even more infuriating: this was planned. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment attack. This wasn't wrestlers losing control during a match. This was a premeditated assault orchestrated by Bronson Reed and Brock Lesnar with the express purpose of removing Seth Rollins from WWE permanently. The coordination, the timing, the brutality, all of it was calculated to inflict maximum damage. Why? What did Seth do to deserve this? What transgression warranted having his entire career, his ability to walk, his quality of life potentially stolen from him? The answer is nothing. Seth Rollins did nothing to deserve this level of violence except exist in the same company as two men who are clearly unhinged, unstable, and completely devoid of conscience or empathy. Let me ask you something, and I want honest answers in the comments. At what point does entertainment cross the line into legitimate assault? Because from where I'm sitting, we crossed that line the moment Seth stopped moving. The medical response was immediate but felt like an eternity. EMTs rushed the ring with a stretcher and a neck brace. They moved with the kind of urgency that told everyone watching that this was serious. These weren't selling an injury for television. These weren't playing up the drama for ratings. These were trained medical professionals responding to a genuine emergency. The way they stabilized Seth's head and neck before moving him. The way they tested for spinal response and got nothing. The way they communicated with each other using medical terminology instead of wrestling lingo. Every single indicator told us that what we'd witnessed wasn't a work, wasn't an angle, wasn't sports entertainment, it was a legitimate medical emergency unfolding in front of millions of viewers. And through it all, Bronson Reed and Brock Lesnar stood at the top of the ramp, smiling. Not selling remorse. Not pretending to be shocked by what they'd done. Smiling like they'd accomplished exactly what they set out to do. That image of those two monsters grinning while Seth Rollins was being loaded onto a stretcher, possibly paralyzed for life, is burned into my brain and makes me sick every time I think about it. The arena erupted in boos so loud that you couldn't hear the announcers. Fans were throwing trash at Reed and Lesnar. Security had to form a barrier to protect them from the righteous fury of the WWE Universe. And they deserved every second of that hatred because what they did was unforgivable. Here's a trivia question for the real fans: how many times has Seth Rollins been WWE Champion? Drop your answer below, and let's show some respect for everything this man has accomplished before it was potentially taken away from him. The reports that came out later that night were devastating. Multiple sources confirmed that Seth had lost all feeling below his waist. Spinal imaging showed severe trauma to his lower thoracic and lumbar vertebrae. Neurologists were brought in immediately. The phrase career-ending injury was being whispered in every wrestling newsroom, and the phrase permanent paralysis was the nightmare scenario that nobody wanted to say out loud but everyone was thinking. Seth Rollins' wife, Becky Lynch, rushed to the hospital immediately. The reports from people close to the situation describe her as absolutely devastated. Can you imagine? Can you put yourself in her shoes for just 1 second? Your husband goes to work, does his job like he has hundreds of times before, and comes home unable to walk because two psychopaths decided to end his career for no justifiable reason? And their daughter? How do you explain to a child why daddy can't pick her up anymore? Why daddy can't play with her like he used to? Why daddy's entire life has changed because of the actions of two men who faced absolutely no consequences until it was too late? This isn't just about Seth Rollins the wrestler. This is about Colby Lopez the human being, the father, the husband, the son, the friend. This is about a person whose entire life has potentially been destroyed, and for what? For a storyline? For shock value? For ratings? Nothing justifies this level of real violence and real consequences. The wrestling community has rallied around Seth in an unprecedented way. Current WWE superstars have spoken out demanding justice. AEW wrestlers have broken the unwritten rule about commenting on other companies' business to express their horror and support. Legends like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and Mick Foley have all issued statements condemning the attack and calling for serious repercussions for Reed and Lesnar. Even Paul Heyman, Brock's longtime advocate and mouthpiece, has been conspicuously silent. No statements defending Brock's actions. No attempts to justify the unjustifiable. Just silence, which speaks volumes about how indefensible this attack truly is. Comment below and tell me, what should WWE's response be? Should Reed and Lesnar face criminal charges? Should they be fired? Should they be blacklisted from the entire wrestling industry? I want to hear what you think is appropriate punishment for ending a man's career. Let's talk about Bronson Reed for a moment, because his role in this is particularly disturbing. Reed has always been an aggressive performer, someone who uses his size and power to dominate opponents. But there's a difference between being a tough competitor and being a legitimate threat to people's safety. Reed crossed that line months ago, and nobody did anything about it. The warning signs were there. The increasingly stiff strikes. The reckless bumps. The complete disregard for his opponent's safety in the name of looking strong. Reed has been building towards something like this, and WWE enabled him every step of the way by not reining in his dangerous behavior when they had the chance. And now Seth Rollins is paying the price for WWE's negligence and Reed's recklessness. Reed's tsunami splash is already one of the most dangerous moves in wrestling, a nearly 400-pound man jumping from the top rope and landing his full weight on someone's chest and abdomen. It's a miracle nobody's been seriously injured by it before now. But doing it twice to an already injured opponent, the second time directly onto their neck and spine? That's not wrestling. That's assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Bronson Reed needs to be held accountable not just by WWE, but by the legal system. What he did wasn't covered by the assumption of risk that wrestlers agree to when they sign their contracts. Seth didn't consent to having his spine deliberately targeted by a man with a documented history of working dangerously. This goes beyond professional wrestling into the realm of criminal behavior. Now let's discuss Brock Lesnar, and this is where things get even more complicated and infuriating. Brock is a legitimate combat sports athlete. He's an NCAA Division I wrestling champion. He's a former UFC heavyweight champion. The man knows exactly how much force he's applying and exactly what damage he's capable of inflicting. When Brock German suplexes someone, he knows precisely how much pressure he's putting on their neck and spine, which means that every single German suplex Brock delivered to Seth Rollins on Monday Night Raw was done with full knowledge of the potential consequences. Brock knew that spiking someone on their head and neck 6 consecutive times could cause catastrophic spinal injury. He knew that Seth's body was already compromised from Reed's initial attack, and he did it anyway because Brock Lesnar doesn't care about anyone but himself. Here's another question for you: do you think Brock Lesnar even feels remorse for what he did, or is he completely incapable of empathy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Brock has a history of working stiff and injuring people. He gave Hardcore Holly a broken neck. He busted Randy Orton open the hard way and gave him a legitimate concussion. He's injured numerous opponents throughout his career, and WWE keeps bringing him back because he's a draw and a ratings boost. But at what cost? How many careers need to be ended? How many lives need to be altered before WWE says enough is enough with Brock Lesnar? The most frustrating part is that Brock doesn't even need WWE. He has his UFC legacy. He has his financial security. He has his farm in Saskatchewan where he can live out his days in peace. He comes to WWE because he wants to, because he enjoys the power and the platform, and because WWE enables his worst tendencies by never holding him accountable for his actions. Seth Rollins deserved better. Seth, who came back from career-threatening injuries twice to continue entertaining us. Seth, who worked through the pandemic era without complaint, carrying WWE programming when attendance was zero and morale was at an all-time low. Seth, who has reinvented himself time and time again to stay relevant and fresh. That man deserved to have his career ended on his terms, when he was ready, in a match of his choosing. Instead, his career and possibly his ability to walk were stolen from him by two men who viewed him as nothing more than a target, a stepping stone, a sacrifice to their own egos and ambitions. It's disgusting, it's heartbreaking, and it should never have been allowed to happen. The WWE Universe is demanding answers. How did this attack get approved? Who sanctioned this level of violence? What safety protocols were bypassed to allow Reed and Lesnar to operate with such reckless abandon? Was this a scripted angle that went horribly wrong, or was this a legitimate assault that WWE is now scrambling to control the narrative around? The silence from WWE corporate has been deafening. No official statement from Triple H about what disciplinary actions will be taken. No comment from Nick Khan about potential legal ramifications. No word from anyone in a position of authority about how they plan to ensure this never happens again. Just silence and carefully worded social media posts sending thoughts and prayers to Seth and his family. Thoughts and prayers don't fix broken spines. Thoughts and prayers don't restore feeling to paralyzed legs. Thoughts and prayers don't give Seth his career back or return him to his daughter's arms. WWE needs to do more than offer hollow platitudes. They need to take decisive action. Give me your take in the comments. Should WWE be held legally responsible for what happened to Seth Rollins? Should his family be able to sue the company for failing to protect their employee? This is a legitimate question that needs to be discussed. The wider implications of this attack extend far beyond Seth Rollins. Every wrestler in WWE and beyond is now questioning their safety. If this can happen to someone like Seth, a top guy, a main eventer, someone with political capital and respect, then it can happen to anyone. The precedent this sets is terrifying. Younger wrestlers are watching this unfold and wondering if they should even continue in this profession. Parents of aspiring wrestlers are second-guessing whether they want their children pursuing a career where this level of violence is not only possible but apparently tolerated. Wrestling schools across the country are fielding questions about safety protocols and insurance coverage because of what happened on Raw. This is a watershed moment for professional wrestling. This is WWE's Benoit situation, their Owen Hart tragedy, their breaking point where they can no longer pretend that the safety of their performers is anything other than a secondary concern to ratings, shock value, and storyline progression. The industry needs to evolve, needs to implement stricter guidelines, needs to hold performers accountable when they work dangerously, and needs to protect the people who make this business possible. Seth Rollins' attack is forcing these conversations whether WWE wants them or not. Mainstream media has picked up the story. Sporting news outlets are covering it. Even non-wrestling fans are seeing the footage and being horrified by what professional wrestling apparently allows to happen. The PR nightmare for WWE is just beginning, and they have nobody to blame but themselves. The medical updates continue to be grim. Seth remains hospitalized under intensive care. Spinal specialists from across the country have been consulted. The most optimistic prognosis suggests months of rehabilitation with no guarantee of full recovery. The worst-case scenario is permanent paralysis requiring lifetime care and support. And somewhere in between those two extremes lies Seth's reality, whatever that may be. Here's a question about Seth's legendary career. Can you name Seth Rollins' signature finisher that he used during his original run with the Shield? Real fans will know this one. Becky Lynch has been by his side constantly, and the toll this is taking on her is visible every time she appears in public. The woman who was the man, who was the face of WWE's women's division, who was one of the toughest competitors in the industry, has been brought to her knees by watching her husband suffer through this nightmare. The strain on their family is immeasurable, and it's all because of Bronson Reed and Brock Lesnar's selfish, reckless actions. The financial implications are staggering as well. Seth's WWE contract is presumably on hold or terminated due to his inability to perform. Medical bills for spinal injuries and paralysis treatment run into the millions. Lost income from merchandise, appearances, and future bookings represents tens of millions in potential earnings. The economic devastation to Seth's family adds yet another layer to this tragedy. And what about Seth's legacy? How will he be remembered? As the architect who revolutionized WWE? As the visionary who carried the company through challenging times? Or as the tragic figure whose career was cut short by a brutal, unnecessary attack? Seth deserves better than to have his story end like this. He deserves better than to be defined by his worst moment rather than his countless triumphs. The roster is rallying around Seth, but there's also palpable fear. If management allowed this to happen to Seth Rollins, what's to stop them from allowing it to happen again to someone else? The trust between WWE's performers and management has been severely damaged, and rebuilding that trust will require more than words. It will require systemic change. Several wrestlers have reportedly requested their releases in the wake of this attack. Others are demanding additional safety measures in their contracts. The Talent Relations Department is in crisis mode trying to prevent a mass exodus of performers who no longer feel safe working for WWE. This is what happens when you prioritize shock value over the well-being of the people who make your product possible. What do you think will happen to the WWE roster after this? Will we see multiple releases and departures? Could this lead to a talent exodus? Share your predictions below. Bronson Reed and Brock Lesnar's motivation for this attack remains unclear, which somehow makes it even more disturbing. There was no blood feud with Seth. No long-term storyline building to this confrontation. No explanation given before, during, or after the assault. They simply decided to end a man's career, and they did it with clinical efficiency and zero remorse. The randomness of it is perhaps the most terrifying aspect. Seth wasn't prepared for this. He had no reason to believe he was in danger. He walked into that arena thinking it was just another Monday Night Raw, just another opportunity to connect with the fans he loves, just another day at the office. And he left on a stretcher, possibly paralyzed for life, with no warning and no explanation. How do you protect yourself from that? How do you guard against attacks that come out of nowhere with no build-up, no indication, no warning signs? The answer is you can't, which means every single WWE wrestler is now working in an environment where they're one unprovoked attack away from having their career and their life destroyed. The legal ramifications are still unfolding. Seth's legal team is reportedly exploring every option, from civil lawsuits against Reed and Lesnar to potential criminal charges to litigation against WWE for negligence and failure to provide a safe working environment. The discovery process alone would be devastating for WWE, revealing internal communications, safety protocols, and corporate decisions that they absolutely do not want made public. WWE might try to settle quickly and quietly, throwing money at the problem to make it go away before it expands into a full-blown legal and public relations catastrophe. But Seth and his family deserve more than a settlement. They deserve justice. They deserve accountability. They deserve to see Bronson Reed and Brock Lesnar face real consequences for their actions. The court of public opinion has already rendered its verdict. Reed and Lesnar are guilty. They're guilty of assault. They're guilty of ending a man's career. They're guilty of inflicting life-altering injuries for no justifiable reason. No amount of WWE spin or corporate damage control can change the fact that we all watched these two men nearly kill Seth Rollins on live television. Last question before we wrap this up: if you could send one message to Seth Rollins right now, what would it be? Drop it in the comments and let's show him that the wrestling newsletter family and the entire WWE Universe is behind him. The wrestling world is watching and waiting. Waiting for WWE to make a statement. Waiting for Reed and Lesnar to face consequences. Waiting for updates on Seth's condition. Waiting to see if the man who gave us so many incredible moments, so much entertainment, so many reasons to love professional wrestling can ever recover from this nightmare. Seth Rollins is a fighter. He's overcome incredible odds before. He's rebuilt his body and his career multiple times. But this might be too much even for him. And if it is, if Seth's career is truly over, if he's truly paralyzed, then the wrestling industry needs to take a long, hard look at itself and ask if this is really acceptable. If this is really what we want professional wrestling to be. Because from where I'm standing, this isn't wrestling. This is violence without purpose. This is cruelty without constraint. This is two men with no conscience destroying a third man's life for reasons that make sense only to them. And it needs to stop. WWE has a choice to make. They can continue down this path of escalating violence and disregarded safety, risking more tragedies like what happened to Seth. Or they can implement real change, real accountability, real consequences for performers who work dangerously and put others at risk. The choice seems obvious, but WWE's track record suggests they'll choose profit over safety every single time. Seth Rollins deserved better. His family deserves better. The wrestling business deserves better. And we, the fans who have supported this industry through everything, deserve better than to watch our heroes get paralyzed for entertainment. Now it's your turn. Sound off in the comments. Tell me what you think should happen to Bronson Reed and Brock Lesnar. Tell me how WWE should respond. Tell me if you're as angry and heartbroken as I am. And most importantly, send your support to Seth Rollins and his family during this impossibly difficult time. Hit that like button if you want justice for Seth. Subscribe to Wrestling Newsletter if you want to stay updated on every development in this story. And share this video everywhere because the world needs to know what happened on Monday Night Raw and why it should never happen again. Seth Rollins' career might be over. But this fight for accountability, for safety, for justice? That fight is just beginning. And we're not backing down until Reed and Lesnar face the consequences they deserve.